Hi there, welcome to Fat Product Review. I'm so excited to be here with Amy Pence-Brown. Hi, Amy, how are you?
Hi, great. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure, my pleasure. So you and I have known each other for a little while, but the way I first got to be familiar with you was from your amazing act of advocacy and activism. Why don't you tell everybody about what you did and how you went viral?
Yeah, I accidentally went viral 5 years ago. Actually, this Saturday is the fifth anniversary of the Stand for Self-Love, as I call it. And I stripped down to a black bikini, took off my clothes and had on a black bikini and blindfolded myself with markers in my hand and a chalkboard sign at my feet that read, if I'm standing for anyone who suffered from a self-esteem issue like me, and I believe all bodies are valuable. If you agree, draw a heart on my body. And what ensued in the largest pedestrian spot in the city in Boise, Idaho, which is a very conservative place, was what only can be described as an extraordinary amount of kindness and vulnerability and a really raw emotional experience. I didn't expect it to go well, but it did. And I had luckily asked a secret photographer to be in the crowd. She was the only person who knew about the event ahead of time. And she stood really far back and snapped some photos that actually came across better than I thought. And I wrote a blog post and we got together and made a little iMovie one night. We'd never done that before, either of us. And I dropped it all into my blog post and it went accidentally viral, completely in a grassroots effort, which was extraordinary. Very quickly, within 24 hours, the local press had picked it up. Within 48, it went national. Within 72 hours, it went international. And the video has been picked up and created into all sorts of shorter versions and longer versions. You can find it all over YouTube and BuzzFeed and USA Today and mass amounts of press. It's currently stands at about 200 million views today, I guess, making it one of the most viral videos of all time still, which is surprising. But it did really, I had been doing work as a body image activist and using performance art and my body as a canvas. And as a writer and an educator and a local leader for a number of years at that point, probably 6 years. But it was really that event that handed me a microphone on an international scale. And it seems that they liked what I had to say about bodies and in particular fat bodies and sort of self-love and the work as a social justice issue. And they have not stopped handing me microphones. So I get to do a lot of fun press all the time still today.
So beautiful. And I remember I saw that. I was like, I have to know this person. Like, wow. Yes, thank you. And people wrote so many kind things all over your body, right? There was all kinds of, and some things they wrote were also very, I guess, revealing about how they felt about their own bodies, right?
Yeah, they went rogue and did not follow my instructions, which was just draw a heart on my body, but they immediately started writing words. I could tell, I could feel it. And at the time, I didn't actually know if they were good words or bad words, but I did get an overwhelming sense of power and safety. And mostly because they didn't just write the words, they started talking to me and they started telling me stories. And the first person was a woman who started crying. And then I started crying. And then multiple people cried the whole time. People who were crying, who didn't know each other, started having conversations about their bodies and opening up about really personal, beautiful things, like older women, talking about sagging breasts and wrinkling skin, and men talking about things with each other, children and parents talking about really important things about bravery and finding your voice and using it for good. So it was really, really extraordinary.
It's so beautiful. I just get choked up thinking about it. And I got the chills, and I hardly ever get that. Hardly ever happens to me, but it's just so beautiful. And it's just, sometimes it's so soul crushing to think about all the horrible thoughts that people have about their bodies, and it's like, oh man, life is so much more than what your body is. And I just wish I could get that through every single person I ever come across, Like I just want to just jump in their brain and be like, there's so much more. Really. It's like, and even I have women in my family that still, they're in their 70s and they're still dieting and they just still can't get it through because well, the messages are so everywhere, right? Like it's just constant barrage all the time that of course you're not smart enough, you're not young enough, you're not thin enough, your boobs aren't perky enough, and that none of that's true. It's just not, and it just breaks my heart. But thankfully we have people like you and me who are trying to do the work and trying to get the word out. And what I especially love that you do, that you seem to be very focused on often, is young people and kind of helping them to see things in a new light. That's so important.
Yes, yeah. And I often taught when I speak and write, I've said this multiple times, that it's really, I credit motherhood as something that launched me into activism. It was really motherhood that made me an activist in a number of ways. That being said, I've been kind of on this trajectory of work, sort of bucking the status quo, and as a feminist activist for a long time. I mean, a long time, since I was a teenager, but it was really motherhood where I made the conscious decision that I needed to be an activist for them. In particular, my oldest child is my daughter, born a girl, and I wanted her to grow up in a different world than I did. And then I had another daughter after that, and that just sort of sealed the deal. So then I realized that not only in doing this work and changing the way I raised them, or trying to help change the culture, that I would be benefiting my own kids, but that I would be benefiting all kids and all adults as well, who were once kids, which we all were. And here it just started coming out more and more in my art and my writing and my work. And as an educator, sort of naturally, and I do a lot of public speaking, and I'm invited a lot to speak in schools and classrooms, and as young as preschool and kindergarten, and then all the way up to college. I do a lot of keynote addresses at colleges and university weeks and classrooms and things like that. But it is so important. As a young child, I did not get the message that fat bodies in particular, or bodies that existed outside of the norm in any way, were acceptable, let alone something to be celebrated or seen as beautiful. And so I think it's changed a lot. I think a lot of us have done a lot of work for a lot of years. People who came before us, of course, which is the whole reason that we're here. But I think that it is something that I like to use my voice for, and I am so honored that people listen to that, and I try to use it for change and good. So not only do I speak in classrooms, but I do a lot of writing about it. I've been speaking a lot on podcasts and on press interviews and writing for magazines, sort of my body positive parenting tips. And I also teach and have created a couple of camps for girls in particular. One called Rad Camp, a body image boot camp for feminist teens for girls ages 13 to 15 here in Idaho. And I've taught that 4 years now in the summers. And then just launched this year a workshop called Be Rad, Be You, a body image workshop for girls ages 10 to 12 in conjunction with our local public library.
Oh, cool. Nice. Do you have, I'm sure you must have a blog where you've written about great books for parents or great books for young kids about talking about body image.
Yes. So I do have a blog and a website, amypence-brown.com. You should also follow me on Instagram and Facebook. You can find it under Amy Pence-Brown on Instagram. My handle is Idaho Amy, so it should come up. On Facebook, my public figure page is also Amy Pence-Brown, writer, artist, body image activist, and all of those places, my blog, on my website, and social media. I find them a really powerful tool to disseminate information.
Yeah.
And I do share a lot in particular about books. And I've written a lot about books. Books changed my life and continue to change my life. And I'm a huge advocate of reading and reading and reading and reading. Yeah. It's on my body positive tip list for adults as well as kids. And we don't have an extraordinary amount of good body positive kid books. I feel like there's so many more coming out every day, but it's taken a long time to get there. But I have written a couple of magazine articles that you can find on my website, highlighting a few favorites of mine. They show up I'm just finishing up this year, the series of zines. I'll show you. These are the first two taking up space. Oh, I'll back up here. And the first one is my top 10 body image tips for people, adults, and teens. And then this one is more, they have art in them from my workshops and classes from other people. And this is more stories from Rad Fatties, who are members of the Boise Rad Fat Collective that I have on Facebook. But my third volume that I'm working on right now is in particular tips for parents and teens and how to create a body positive home in really simple ways. And it has a few books on the list in there, as well as films and TV shows. And in the Boise Rad Fat Collective, we've compiled a huge list of books. And now I feel like there are lots of books that can be seen as body positive, in particular discussing things like the color of our skin, right? Because it's the largest visible organ on our bodies, and what people think of it and how we think of it greatly affects our body image. So books with featuring children or people with disabilities or disabled bodies are really important. And of course, fat bodies and talking positively about fat bodies is another important thing. And talking about people of all genders or not male gendered people in a positive light, right? So, I mean, these are important books to have. And luckily there are so many more of them now. And people keep writing them, and I'm so thrilled.
To that point, it's like that default, right? When people write books or create whatever, it's always the default is a white person often, and usually, not often male, white male. It gets a little boring and a little old, and there's not a lot of representation. I'm sure that's true in all kids' books as well, and not a lot of representation for trans bodies and fat bodies and queer bodies and Black bodies, and I'm sure there's a lot of room to grow there. But what we'll do is we'll put in the show notes, your blog and stuff, especially if you don't know ones in particular you want me to highlight, I'll put the exact link to that blog in the show notes, because I love people to at least, you probably know more than the rest of us know about what's out there and what you think is really, because representation does really matter. I know for me, it would have changed my life for the better, if I could have seen some representation in the media that with a body that looked like mine. It is getting better, as we know. There's still a long ways to go, but anyway, I appreciate all the work that you do around that. And tell everybody what the camps are about. Like, what do you guys do during those camps?
I like to incorporate a lot of things that have worked for me, which is normally how I do my work. As an activist, I don't sell a lot of things. Actually, I do require that the young people who attend the workshops pay. That being said, they have never had to pay, because my fans and followers and feminists around the world have donated so much money to these camps. I've gotten some great grants for them as well, that they can all attend free of charge, and I can still be paid for my labor and expertise a little tiny bit, and I can give them books. So I will tell you that is a really important part of the camps and classes, is that we use a book in the work, and then they get to take it home with them for their bookshelf. So in the younger girls workshop, it's just one day, and that's a good amount of time for girls ages 10 to 12. And we do a lot of art and craftivism is what I call this mix of craft and activism. Or I didn't come up with the term. Somebody else did, but I work in that realm, and we call it that. And they've contributed to my zines. They've contributed art and writing to the zines as well. And they make art for themselves. And I use the books. In the younger girls workshop, they all got Sonia Renee Taylor's new book for young girls called Celebrate Your Body, which is amazing. Resource, and a brand new book. And the older girls historically have gotten a book by Kelly Jensen called Here We Are, and it's 44 voices that talk about feminism for the real world. And it's a variety of shorter articles and essays by all sorts of active artists and musicians and illustrators and writers about all sorts of things like sexuality and food and fatness and mental health issues in particular. And she just wrote another book that I'm in. I have it right here because I just got to host a panel for her book opening or her book launch with Julie Murphy. And speaking of great writers for young adults, if you haven't read Dumplin',
Oh yeah.
I can't recommend that enough. But this is the book Body Talk, and it is 37 Voices Explore Our Radical Anatomy. And again, it's all sorts of people. And I'm featured in the back as a fat activist to follow, which I am so honored
Yay.
to be. So, but she has another book, Kelly does, that came before this about feminism that I usually give to the teen girls at that camp. And then also a body image workbook for teens by Julia Taylor. So we watch videos and we eat food and we make food, we make homemade ice cream together and we make a lot of art. We use art as a fun way to explore things. And we do some talking and writing and a little bit of reading. And those are always the best ways to teach. I think people prefer to learn when it's fun and hands-on, especially kids and teens.
Yes.
You know, they sit in classrooms long enough with having people lecture at them.
Right.
And they love to talk. I found even the teens are a little more reluctant as you get older. It's harder to talk about hard things, but boy, do they open up when they they get in there. And I think that my work helps a lot too. I show them the video of the Stand for Self-Love. They've all seen it because it went so viral, but we talk about it again and it helps them feel safe. And we set some sort of safe ground rules as well. And none of them know each other. Their parents have often forced them to come to my camp originally because they see a need in their child, or school counselors recommend my camps and classes a lot. But once they get there, they've always told me at the end how glad they were and how they didn't want to come. And they were so glad that they did.
How rewarding. Two things come to mind from my own life. Once when I was like 12, my mom took me for the first time we went to Lane Bryant, and they had a magazine called BBW, Big Beautiful Women, and my mind was blown. I was like, wait, I could be beautiful, Like it was life changing for me. I was like, wow, I had no idea. And then I forget what the other thing I was going to say, but that was a big game changer for me. And I know, when I was about 10 years old, I had stretch marks on the inside of my thighs, and I wrote this big long letter to Dear Abby, but I didn't know what to do with it. And then my mom found it, and she was like, I didn't know this was bothering you, and it turned into this great conversation. But yeah, I was going to ask Dear Abby, what do I do about these stretch marks on my inner thighs? So when you were talking about how these girls open up to you, I have a feeling that's something that comes up, right? Is they're nervous or worried about stretch marks, or especially when your breasts are developing, you get a lot of stretch marks. It's scary when you're little and you don't really know what's going on. And I'm sure all those other things about their bodies that they are very confused about. And, because if you're not blonde and blue-eyed with big boobs and a tiny waist and tiny feet, you tend to think there's something wrong with you, right? So they open up about those kinds of things.
Yeah, and it comes up. I mean, I have a son that's in first grade now, so he's 6 years old. I mean, and it started coming up for him, things that they would read in class or even on the playground at school, calling people fat as like an insult, like a playground taunt, right? That they learned early on somehow that, being mean about someone's body is how you be mean, basically. And that fat was a negative thing. And so my kids have all learned, that's one big important thing, is that I've reclaimed the word fat, like I know you have and other people have too, as a neutral, if not positive, descriptor of just a body type. Like it doesn't hurt me. Yes, if I don't let it hurt me, they're not telling me anything new. It is hurtful when people yell things in a mean way at you, whatever that word is. It's still hurtful, but it's so helpful when you have allies or advocates or other people like my kids out there, just saying like, whatever, and that's a common thing that my kids do is that my mom is fat and she thinks it's fine, or she says it's fine to be fat. We all have different bodies, and they kind of just leave it at that. And I think that that's really helpful. And so many of them have learned so much stuff from such a young age, often from media and often from their parents, unfortunately. I think the way that we Many adults in their lives talk about their bodies, talk about food, talk about clothing, what they should and shouldn't wear, what other people should and shouldn't wear
Mm-hmm,
for their,
mm-hmm.
body type.
Yeah.
So it's how people look or how their bodies have changed over time. And I don't think that they realize that their kids are picking that up and are hearing it, no matter how much they might tell them,
Mom and
"You're
dad are talking about
beautiful."
somebody
Yeah.
wearing leggings or whatever. Oh, that lady shouldn't wear those leggings. Your kids hear that, you know.
Mhm.
Have you had this experience where you've been out somewhere and then somebody, a small person, identifies your body as fat, and then their parents freak out? And I'm like,
Yes.
it's okay. And I go, I also, isn't it great that my body's so different than other bodies? Isn't it cool that so many bodies are so, we all look different? Isn't that neat? And you can tell the parents are freaking out, but I'm like, kids just say it like it is. I don't mind at all, you know, because they're not
Mhm.
saying, "Ooh, you're fat." They're saying, "Oh, mom, look at her fat tummy," you know. I'm like, "Oh yeah, isn't it beautiful?" And they're like, the parents are like, "Ah," you know.
Yeah, that's a great response. I always love when people do that because I think that makes a huge difference, not only in that child's life, your response to them, but also in that parent's life or anyone else who's standing around the store who might have heard that because they
Mhm.
probably did, the clerk or somebody else in line and is probably
Yeah.
mortified or wondering how you're going to respond.
Uh-huh.
Um, and so I always think that's such a great, simple teaching moment and such a good way to be an activist in your own life. And these
Yeah.
small moments make a huge difference.
Something I mentioned to you via email, and this has happened to me a lot, especially when I had my boutique. But yesterday it caught me off guard because I've been out of that world for a little while, you know, and I'm always around in life with my fat friends, you know, my friends who aren't fat but know about fat liberation and fat acceptance. So this one caught me off guard where this person asked me, you know, where do you get all your confidence? And I know what she was trying to ask me, you know, but if you really think about that sentence, it can be rude. Like, why wouldn't I be confident? What do you mean? But I didn't take it that way. I took it like she really just needs more confidence. Like she has low self-esteem. And, you know, I was like, I don't even, first of all, there's not really one answer. Like, I don't know. How do I have this confidence? I don't know. I received a lot of unconditional love when I was a baby. Like, where did it start, Amy? I don't know. I don't know. But have people asked you that? And how do you feel about that question?
Yeah, people say that to me all the time. I mean, I get
Mhm.
that quite often. And I think in particular, it's often related to, I got it a lot about the stand for self-love, for example, in the market with the wearing a bikini and talking about how I wore bikinis all the time at that point. But it took me a lot of years to get there. I didn't. I used to wear full coverage swim dresses because I was
Right.
so embarrassed of my fat body. And it took me a long time to wear less clothing, which I desired because I hate having a lot of clothing on in the summer and when I'm wet. Um, but people, they'll either say confident or brave. You're so brave for wearing that, right? So, and it's often related to clothing, especially clothing that they think that we are not supposed to be wearing in our fat body, that is not meant for our fat body, right? So, and I think like you, that what they really mean is not so much brave, but confident, right? Like, how did you get so confident? How did you feel so confident to wear this? Because it's not inherently brave to wear, clothing, but they're
We
so
have to.
confined. Yeah, exactly. Although I do get this comment as well, not just related to clothing, but when I'm not wearing clothing in a lot of photos, and I use my body as a canvas a lot, like I mentioned
Yeah.
for my art, and a lot of it I'm often photographed and painted and depicted either in selfie series as an artist or by other artists nude. And so, especially being nude and reclaiming a nude body as a fat person, like I'm
Yeah.
not even trying to hide it, right? Like
Hmm.
it's just out there. And so I get it that way too. And I think they're so confined really by fear and shame, right? And what they see in me and you is freedom, really, right? And something that they desire, usually, sometimes desire, right? But sometimes that they find it like dangerous and disruptive, right? That some people find it compelling and something desirable, but some people really do find it sort of uncomfortable and fearful when they
Yeah.
see
Mhm.
people acting outside of the box or
Right.
doing
Yeah.
something that they could never have. But I do think it comes. The other thing I think it comes from, which you have done too, is practice, right? And I think that people think that we just woke up one day like this, and it's not something that we've literally practiced until it's become a habit and embedded in our lives so much that we don't even think about it anymore.
Right.
Like I think you and I both just have such a higher level of confidence than maybe lots of other women, and that it is something that takes a lot of practice and a lot of like unlearning and rethinking. And then it shows up in so many other ways besides what you're wearing, right? It's like taking risks and unapologetically eating food when you're hungry,
in front of other people.
or, asking for what you want, or saying what you mean, right? It's all of these things that sort of,
well, just existing in a fat body is political, right? And people ask me, like, you go out to dinner alone? You eat by yourself in a restaurant? Yeah. And like, you eat the food there? Yeah, I do. Like, that to them, it seems like it's so crazy. And I'm like, well, sometimes I don't have anybody to go to lunch with. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. I'm going to go eat. Not right now because of COVID, but yeah, I'll eat at a restaurant. I go to movies by myself. I don't care. There's so much freedom when you can get to a point in your life where you don't care about other people's opinion. And that's when the power, for me, that's when I felt like I stepped into my power. I was like, if I don't love you, I really don't care about your opinion of me. Why would I? I don't value your opinion. I value your opinion, Amy Pence-Brown, but I don't value some random person at the grocery store that says, move it, fat ass. Like, I don't care at all.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm not paying my bills, as they say, that's, I don't know. It's a lot of power in that. If you can get there, it's a lot of power, and stop worrying about what other people think, because it's no value to me anyway.
It is. It's incredibly liberating. And I think they see that. I mean, I think for the most part, there are certainly women who are afraid of it and still are fearful and still see it as threatening. But a lot more women, and I think that's probably the case in your experience yesterday too, see it as like really desirable, but they just can't even fathom.
Yeah, they don't know how to get there. And I know they just want a piece of it. They just want a piece of it, right? And I understand that. So, like I said, most of the time I know people they mean well behind it. There's not any malicious intent behind it. But sometimes I'm why is Halle very confident? Right? That's like I've heard that repeated a few times. I'm like, yeah, I mean, how come nobody questions her confidence? Because
exactly. It is irritating, and I totally get it. We have this conversation a lot in the Rad Fat Collective, because in particular around clothing, right, that people will be like, oh, you're so brave for wearing that. And it sounds it's like a backhanded compliment that you're not quite sure how to take. And I get it so often that I mostly just take it.
Yeah.
For, what I want them, what I want to teach them in that moment.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. I've had this experience where a person who I consider a friend of mine, she wanted to see a picture of my boyfriend because she was surprised that he was not a large person. I'm like, yeah, that's really offensive. Like, okay, sure, here's a picture of him. And she's like, oh, wow, you're supposed to be a friend of mine, right? Yeah, special. But anyway, are you noticing that I'm wearing my dissenting collars with RG's collars and my earrings? Can you see them?
Oh, lovely. Yes.
I wore them just for you. I thought you would like them.
Oh, they're great.
Yeah. Oh, I love her. Yeah. I could go on forever about all this stuff, and I would love to have you on the show again. I would love to talk about the womanizer, the satisfier, whatever kind of sex toys you want to talk about. We can talk about lingerie. We can talk about, how can people get your zines, by the way? You didn't mention that.
So I'm going to launch them. The plan is this weekend, just in time for the 5th anniversary of the Stand for Self-Love. I always like to do some sort of commemorative art project every year on that anniversary. And it'll be all 3. So here's the first 2. So the third one is literally in production. Like, I'm still putting it together and photocopying it. And there's art, and I color it, and I include other artists' work, and I hand sew the bindings. You can kind of see. They're all messy and handmade. So all 3 of them will be for sale for $13 on my website or any of social media like Instagram or Facebook. And they're very limited edition. I think there's 10. There'll be about 10 sets of the 3 because they're handmade.
That's a lot of work.
Yeah, and I committed to this, a year ago. It's taken a little bit longer to make all three of them throughout the year, given COVID and everything else that's going on.
You're a busy woman, and
Yeah.
you have 3 kids and a husband.
Yes, yes. And they're all homeschooling right now too, since
Holy
college.
moly. So
Yeah.
homeschooling, not the school Zooming, but homeschooling?
No, the school is Zooming. They're
Okay,
doing an
yeah.
online school, but it feels very much like homeschooling,
Yeah.
wherein I have to be there helping them,
Yeah, of course, yeah.
doing a lot of teaching, doing a lot of tech, doing a lot of hand holding, in particular with my youngest one. And a lot of complications. It's a whole different way of learning for all of them when
Hey,
they're
I'm so
used
glad.
to,
I
yeah,
would not
public
I would not
school.
have learned one thing if that would have happened to me when I was a kid. It would have been terrible for me. I'm an extrovert. I like being around other people. I learn by other people. I don't learn from watching stuff on the TV. So my heart is full. I just feel for all of you. And the only reason I asked about the homeschooling is because I talked to Bruce yesterday from Chubster, and he said he and his wife are actually homeschooling. They decided to take it on themselves instead of trying to do the Zoom schooling this year. At least they're going to try it this year. So I'm like, oh, Bruce, that's a lot. It's really a lot. So my heart goes out to all the kids and parents out there right now, because this is not easy for anybody to navigate at all. But we shall onwards and upwards, right, Amy?
Right, always.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Thank you so much. I can't wait to talk with you again. Give me all the stuff to put in the show notes, and that way people know how to get your zines, and I'll definitely share it this weekend for you too. And congratulations. It was such a beautiful thing that you did. And I think it's so fun to see how other people have done it themselves, or they've done drawings of you and paintings. It's so fun to watch. It's just so heartwarming. You've touched a lot of people. That's so cool.
Yes, thank you. And thanks for having me.
Of course, my pleasure. We'll talk soon, okay?
Sounds great.
All right, thanks, Amy. Take care. Bye. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you want to get more of our fat product reviews. Take care.